Hello, this is Vasile Hodorogea from the University of Bucharest. Together with my colleague Tulia Cășvean, we studied how the trade unions communicate with their members in the new context of COVID. Our premises were that the new labor relations are influenced by the technological improvements, by the constant innovation, the green business and climate change, the gender balance and equality in the labor market, the growing globalization. Labor relations imply social dialogue, and this is the process of negotiation by which different actors in society reach agreements to work together on policies and activities. There are some key factors for this social dialogue: informing, consulting, negotiating, and reaching agreements. And there are also some influences, and the main trends are decentralization and upscaling. For example, there are the influences brought by the COVID-19 pandemic rules, work from home or the social distancing. Up to now, far too little attention has been paid to how the trade unions communicate internally with their members. And the aim of the current study is to enrich the research literature, focusing on how the key Romanian trade unions run the communication with their members and how they adapt to the current context, focusing on the internal communication axis that enable organizations to achieve their objective and to gain the trust of their members. The main areas of interest are the key topics addressed in the communication with the members, the tools and the media mix used, the frequency of the formal communication with the trade union members, the accountable and the responsible person with the internal communication, and the management of the feedback from the members, all in the context of what is different versus 2019. Considering the scarcity of studies conducted about the Romanian trade unions' communication strategies and tactics, we defined the key elements for this study by using researches focused on the managerial and business communication, covering from corporate communication to staff communication. We discovered that trust and trustworthiness highly influence the quality of the social dialogue when they are manifest among involved parties and within the organization. The mechanism of trust is largely studied in relationship with the management of communication, the management of reputation, and the management of organizational image. In the case of the unions, the commitment of the leaders is that brings the members' trust. The scholarly literature also shows a clear interest towards the institutional trust expressed as the relationship between the social dialogue parties. The internal communication is virtually present in any organization, and in the trade unions, this is a strategic approach based on goals and objectives, on resources, from human resources to technological resources, and it aims to motivate members and build pride in the organization. The definition of the internal communication that we chose for the purpose of this study defines some key attributes for it: the strategic management of interactions and relationships between the stakeholders at all levels within the organization. Internal communication helps the organization to achieve its objectives by having a role to play in developing employee commitment and, again, trust, and by building consensus, focusing on symbolic use of language. Internal communication enhances identification when members perceive that they are receiving enough information about their role and when they are taken seriously by their leaders. The trade union plays an important role between the individual and the organization, representing and supporting the individual interests based on the individual's trust and mandate. The employees are influenced by the interpretations that people are making of the organization's actions, intentions, and identity. And we also found out that the relationship between the communication producer and the receiver is bilateral, but not necessarily symmetrical. The employees are too often treated as a single public, although they are not simply passive recipients of the internal communication. There are different groups of stakeholders within the trade union members. What methods did we use? We identified the extent to which the processes and instruments described in literature can be observed in the internal communication of some strong trade unions and federations in Romania. And then we ran some in-depth interviews with relevant trade union federations and the confederation's top leaders. We collected information about the tools and the media used, the type and the frequency of the formal communication, the feedback management, the role and the responsibility played in the organizations, the differences versus the pre-pandemic period. What did we find? An increased interest of unions leadership to communicate more often with members and to get in touch with all the members' layers in order to build and strengthen trust. The increased communication is linked with the need for membership retention, that is declining as it appears, the need for a bigger volume of clear information about the protection for members, income, employment, safety, and health at work. The technology in communication increases in these times. Besides the telework, working from home, there is a considerable increase of online communication during pandemics versus the previous years. Emails, WhatsApp groups, Facebook pages, internal apps, and owned website. The traditional communication techniques are still in place and are still valued. Face-to-face communication, flyers, and print communication displayed on dedicated boards were still used during the pandemic period. The feedback from the members gained a bigger value than before. Unions try to reply to more, sometimes to all the emails from the members. Unions are collecting more comments and opinions from the members through the local leaders. The study suggests that despite the efforts of unions to answer all the emails from members, the one-way model of communication is still in place, especially when it comes to social media, for example, where the engagement with the members and non-members is still at low levels. The agenda is also influenced by the context. At the beginning of the pandemic situation, the topics addressed within the unions covered, as expected, the high interest for safety and health, sanitary protection measures, physical distance, and the avoidance of personal contact, providing protective equipment. There are some hard topics on the agenda that are extensively covered: the need of financial protection measures, new addendums signed with companies on the pandemic topic, the evolution of the negotiations for the collective labor contract, advices for employees regarding safety and health, negotiations for technically unemployment, the new working program, and some payments. The soft topics, less covered, declining in frequency, are those related to personal events like retired colleagues, new members acquired, new local leaders appointed, because individual events are less important now than common achievements during the period of crisis. Also less covered are anniversaries, the Day of the Workers in the specific sector, the holidays like Easter and Christmas, and the National Day. There are some hot points in communication that are used to create that identification that I was talking about earlier. The solidarity, the victories, the challenges, and nonetheless, the union's values. Protests were also reflected strongly in internal communication. There were hypes in communication using multiple channels, including external communication, press releases, open letters, messages boards, interviews, and so on, that reinforced the union power and solidarity. The key takeouts from the interviews indicated that the trade unions use internal communication for informing and constant interaction with members, for creating emotional bonding between leaders and all members. The objectives are to inspire people to become passionate vectors for spreading the union's messages and to promote the dialogue based on transparency that drives engagement for unions' causes. The increasing communication needs drove to an increase of number of people covering this kind of tasks. Nonetheless, in all the cases, the content is approved at the highest level of the organization, president, vice president, or a replacing high-level leader. The trade unions have not used paid communication like ads or advertorials, but they increased the frequency of communication, moving from a sporadic communication only when notable events take place in the trade union to 2 or 3 weekly messages with via different channels. Most of it, the new channels, emails, Facebook, WhatsApp groups, internal communication apps developed especially for the organization during this period. The current study showed that the trade unions have focused more on internal communication during the pandemic period, accessing multiple points of interaction and communication technologies. The need for a clear and constant information, the changes in the way of communication with members, mediated by technology rather than face-to-face, and the need for adaptability to the current situation, the new agenda, including the new different members' needs, increased the intensity of communication with members, bringing new topics on the table. The trade unions communicated more often on more topics, involving more people in the communication tasks, with a clear objective to strengthen the trust in the leaders and in their actions. The trade unions embraced new tools and technologies for communicating internally, paying more attention to this aspect of the organization life. The technology is widely used to facilitate communication with members. Some developed internal apps, yet trust is further strengthened through face-to-face meetings and from the results obtained in the negotiations with the management or with the shareholders. Constantly informing the members about the trade union's life, news, events, common achievements, and progresses strengthens the members' beliefs and goals, motivating them to be loyal to the organization and to further fight for the common goals. Although this research brings some important contribution for better understanding the topic, it has some certain limitations, of course. The study covers only 3 of the trade union organizations, therefore generalization should be carefully carried out. Additional studies being necessary to cover the trade union movement in Romania, both in the private and in the public sector. Further studies must also include opinions and attitudes of regular members about the effectiveness of internal communication, because for this study we only interviewed leaders of the unions. Thank you very much for your attention.